Hello and welcome to the third in our series of property damage podcasts focusing on flooding and property flood resilience, known as PFR. I am Rosemary Scott, an associate here at BLM, and I'm joined today by Graham Brogden from GJB Consultancy. For those of you who don't know, Graham was previously the head of technical claims at Aviva and is the former chair of the DEFRA Property Flood Resilience Roundtable. Graham now works in an advisory and consultancy role with a focus on PFR.
Thank you and hello.
The previous podcasts in this series have addressed whether flooding is a future number one claims concern, what PFR is and what it entails. You may also have seen our recent vlog highlighting what the Code of Practice is, how it is intended to work, who should be using it, and where you can find the detail. Today, Graham and I will be discussing whether the Code of Practice might be a starting place for market confidence in property flood resilience. So, Graham, without further ado, can you give us a bit of an overview about how the Code of Practice will work in reality?
Yeah, certainly. So I think it's important to understand, first of all, that PFR is not just about an individual product. It's about a whole system, and the whole property needs to be considered when you're thinking of providing PFR to that property and for the people that occupy that property. So the Code of Practice is made up of 6 standards, and each standard has a number of aims which need to be met in order to achieve the overall standard. And this covers every step from the risk analysis right the way through to the maintenance of any PFR products that have been installed. So essentially that's the kind of essence of the Code of Practice.
Okay, and have you got any examples of where you think that the implementation of the Code of Practice will provide tangible benefits?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's important to ensure that anyone working in PFR is working to that Code of Practice and delivering PFR solutions in line with it. So CIRIA are currently developing training for professionals working in the industry, and the DEFRA Roundtable are developing a PFR scoring mechanism. All of this will come together to ensure that those standards are met, as I mentioned previously, but also that everything is being done by professionals, qualified professionals, and you're getting some recognisable scoring mechanism on the back of that and a certificate, which should in turn start to build confidence that PFR works. And together this will start to drive the uptake and the confidence in PFR, I think.
Okay, so you've mentioned, the aim is to drive confidence in PFR, but is there sort of any ways that you think that we'll be able to get people using the Code of Practice?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that any schemes certainly that are laid down for PFR are promoting and ensuring that the Code of Practice is used and implemented. So the EA are currently developing their new framework for PFR, which is underpinned by the Code of Practice, and ensuring products that are used have been tested to BSI standards, which means it brings everything together, the people, the products, and the system. Local authorities will also be adopting the code for future PFR schemes through grant processes, but it's also important that anybody that's getting involved in PFR at all is using the Code of Practice. So we certainly hope to see insurers adopting the Code of Practice when recovering properties following flood, particularly where they are maybe using the grant scheme to install more PFR.
Okay, and I understand there's the plans for some sort of central register or database. Is that something that's sort of in the pipeline?
Yeah, certainly. At the moment, we're working on a flood compliance platform, and again, we're working in conjunction with CIRIA to deliver that. And this will essentially be a database that records properties that have had PFR done. It will also be able to, it will work in line with the standards of the Code of Practice, which means it will capture data, including any maintenance on those products. And again, this is desperately needed to understand the number of properties that are being made more resilient to flooding, but also to help create that evidence base going forward of where a property may flood again, but is being the impact of that flooding is greatly reduced because of the PFR measures.
Okay, and what in your opinion, what do you think that the future is going to look like, in relation to PFR and the implementation of the Code of Practice?
I think the main thing is we would like to see it as common practice, and the people are not having to talk about it anymore, but it's just naturally used as the way of carrying out good PFR schemes. And that's not just where you're retrofitting a property. We would like to see these standards adopted for new builds, particularly where properties are in flood risk areas, whether it's surface water or fluvial flooding. So we want to see that really being taken up by everybody and thought about whenever any sort of retrofit or building work is being carried out.
Okay, and do you think that we'll see an effect on claim spend, through the use of the code and PFR?
Well, I think we're already seeing some good evidence, and there's a good EMAG out there that Mary Donough's put together of businesses and properties that have already made these adaptations to their property, and they've been flooded again since they've made these adaptations. And you can see the difference between the first flood and the second flood, and the reduction in time and cost for putting that business or property back and getting it up and running again. So I don't think there's any doubt that claim spend will reduce once PFR is adopted and done properly going forward.
Okay, so that will help to increase market confidence, because the market will be aware that there are steps that can be taken that are useful, and so ever increasing claim spend isn't just something that's just going to happen. Is that something you'd agree with?
I would agree with that. Yeah, like I say, we're already starting to see that, and I think if, as I said, that it's treated as a system and everything is taken into consideration, it's important to understand that PFR won't stop flooding, but it will greatly reduce the impact of flooding. Reducing that impact will ultimately result in reduced costs.
Okay, and one final point. I mean, you mentioned sort of incorporating this into new builds. Do you see the potential for the principles of the code to be included in building regulations, for example, in the future?
I would certainly hope that the building regs are influenced by seeing more standards adopted throughout this PFR. I think at the moment it takes an awful long time to change building regs, and you need a lot of evidence in order to understand what building regs you want to change. But I think this piece of work is absolutely the starting blocks for that, to create that evidence base through the flood compliance platform, and to start to demonstrate that in adopting PFR correctly and using the right standards, that it actually does work and it will reduce costs. And then one day we hope to see that reflected through building regs.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thank you for your insight into how the Code of Practice will work and how it will benefit things. Thank you for your time today, Graham, and for your very valuable contribution. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the podcast. If you have any questions or comments on anything that's come up, please get in touch at propertydamage@blmlaw.com. The next podcast will be on the impact of flood risk on renewal, the broker perspective. So keep an eye out for that.